Hey there. I wanted to talk a little bit about what it means to be centered in the divine. Because when we are centered in the divine, we are in our center, and this is how we become an antidote to the experience of conflict. Now, when we are centered in the divine, this is when our thoughts harmonize with the divine, or you could say our thoughts harmonize with the thoughts of God. And this is then we allow the activity of God to unfold through us, for us, as us, and into our lives. And we will see God as the active force that has the potential to unfold through all things. Now, when the activity of God unfolds through a condition or an event, we meet solutions. We get inspired. This reduces conflict. Now, conflict in our lives, of course, we all know what conflict is. And you might even be thinking about global conflict that is weighing heavy on you right now. But I would like you to think for just a moment about a conflict you are personally experiencing. And if you want, write it down, because we're going to address this in a few minutes. Now, I could share that like a conflict that I addressed recently was with a family member, and she was ghosting me, and I like had to try to figure out what was going on, but I was getting really anxious about it. Okay. So think about this personal conflict that you might be experiencing. Now, the reason that being centered in the divine is an antidote to conflict is that all conflict, okay, whether it's big or small, it starts with lack consciousness. And lack consciousness is when we separate ourselves from God. Our thoughts are not in harmony with the divine. Okay, our thoughts will be focused on conditions. We get into mistaken thinking, right? And we get in the way of the living God unfolding through us and into our lives. So conflict, it always starts from within us, right? Maybe we're blaming something, we'll point our finger at it, right? We see a situation or event, but see, the act of blaming even adds to the conflict. Now, I know there is also global conflict happening right now, and with horrific things, and this is very different from personal conflict we may be experiencing in our own lives. But I want you to think about this. In our own lives, our own conflict starts with maybe we're not getting along with someone. Maybe we get mad at someone for something they did, or maybe we're judging. Maybe we are criticizing. Okay? Now, this conflict will just affect us personally right here in the area of influence in our own life, right? If we're having conflict, then somebody else in our circle may also experience that conflict with us, or on our behalf even, okay? But this is where we're going to experience conflict, in the package of our life or our area of influence. But as maybe you're the leader of a family, your area of influence gets a little bigger, doesn't it? Okay, if you're the leader of the family, that conflict can spread to that bigger area of influence. What if you became a community leader? Then your area of influence is bigger, so the conflict can spread even more. Okay, think about world leaders, and they have a huge area of influence, right? The world stage is their area of influence. Okay, so it's not that conflict doesn't start off the same with everybody, it does. It's just that the area of influence size changes. But the seed of conflict, it's always the same. It always starts off the same. It is lack consciousness and not being centered in the divine, right? And where there is lack consciousness, we get in the way of solutions and inspiration, guidance on like what is the next best thing that we could do, that inspiration could actually be the idea that changes everything, right? That inspiration could be the idea that brings forth the absolute best solution that you ever could imagine. All right, so conflict, it affects everyone in the same way in that it blocks the flow of good. It blocks the unfolding, right, of the living God, the unfolding of the inspiration and the grand ideas. Now, it's true that globally, I don't think we've ever experienced conflict to this degree. Even with our first two world wars, the amount of information that we got was greatly limited to what we have now because of being on social media. So here is the power of being centered in the divine. When we are centered in the divine, we are aligned with the divine, right? God is all things, and that means me, and that means everything else. We seek the truth of God in all things. This is how we become the way of good in this world, right? And this is how we make way for solutions and ideas and inspirations. And it is the solutions and the ideas and the inspirations that will make all the difference in our lives and in the lives of others. It's not the desperate ideas or the manipulative ideas that spread greater good, right? But that's all we're going to get if we are not centered in the divine, if we are in conflict. All we'll get are manipulative ideas, desperate ideas, disruptive ideas, more ideas that are just soaked in conflict. So when we're centered in the divine, we get the divine idea, we receive a divine inspiration, and we act on it. And it's the acting on inspired ideas that changes things, that makes us a force for good, right? Acting on those divine ideas. Now, if you were to write down every inspired thought that you had through the day, and you were to act on every inspired thought that you had during the day, in 1 year, you would not recognize your life. You just wouldn't, right? Every act of inspiration, it triggers greater good to flow into our lives. And this is how you are able to do greater things. Now, the author, Thomas Crum, he said, he's an author, you can look him up on Amazon or anywhere. He said, centeredness is a true psychophysiological phenomena that affects everything in your environment. Everything in your environment is the package of your life. It is the area of your influence. So if we look now about how things are happening, conflict is happening on a global scale, and it feels like it's escalating. If we're not centered in the divine, we'll actually add to all that. What happens when we become maniacs with worry and judgment and criticism? Like what happens, right? We just make everyone around us miserable, right? In fact, I saw recently where somebody on social media shared how sad she was over the passing of an actor. And she just loved this actor so much. Somebody totally blasted her because they did not think she should be focusing on that, because there's so many other really horrible things happening on our planet. So here we have conflict about conflict, right? So most of us, when it comes to global conflict, most of us, we cannot participate with it directly unless we buy a plane ticket and fly there, okay? We're participating only in the area of influence in our own lives. Okay, so think about this quote again. Centeredness is a true psychophysiological phenomena that affects everything in your environment. So this is where we start, in our own environment and our own area of influence. When we are being our centered self, the activity of God unfolds through us. Now, this is one of the reasons that prayer is so important to the whole New Thought philosophy, because prayer, it doesn't change outside things, it changes us. So we show up differently, right? We open the way for the activity of God to unfold in our lives, often in really surprising ways, right? Because it will usually happen in a way that we didn't ever think of ourselves. Now, think about conflict and think about personal conflict versus global conflict. And do you know you actually handle them the same way, right? You handle them the same way. Conflict is conflict, whether it's global or whether it's just your next door neighbor, right? The level of awfulness, of course, can change. But go back to this quote. I just want to read this quote again. Centeredness is a true psychophysiological phenomena that affects everything in your environment. Okay, that's your area of influence, what you have the power to change. To seek only the truth of God in all situations, then, and be centered in the divine, this is to be the way of God in this world. Now, Carl Jung said this: much of the evil in this world is due to the fact that man, in general, is hopelessly unconscious. Now, the New Thought philosophies would define evil as all evil, as being hopelessly unconscious. So when we're centered in the divine, because this centeredness is a true psychophysiological phenomena that affects everything in your environment, this is why we become the antidote for even global conflict. Even global conflict. And you know what, Lightworkers? We have been training for this. We have been training for this since day one. Our purpose in becoming conscious is to have a greater awareness of the truth of God in all things. And now we are being called to do this on a global scale. All of the spiritual stuff, right? All of this stuff that we have been working on, it's not just so we can be happy because we know stuff, right? It's not so we can just say, oh, you know, I just did my affirmations this morning and everything is so good, right? This is not just about us. This is now about putting it to work for the planet. Okay, it's boots on the ground time. And now is when we are living a life. We put this to work to show that we can live a life that honors this idea that all are one, right? We are all one. God is all things, and that means each and every one of us, even the maniacs, right? Even the maniacs. So this is our power of being centered in the divine, is that we will view global conflict as an opportunity to put all this stuff to work, right? And this is the big one. Again, this is what we have been training for. Global conflict gives us the opportunity to become conscious of the whole, conscious of our oneness and connection to each other, and conscious of our power to expand the good. And together, when we expand the good, it's even greater. It's even greater. Together we become a rising tide. So here's our call to action for this week. Okay, I'll start with our affirmation. I am the way of God in this world. I am the way of God in this world. I am the way of God in this world. If you prefer, you can say, I am the way of good in this world. Now, we know in this world right now, there is a lot that we could be pointing our finger at, right? We could be blaming, and nobody would blame us for blaming the conflict that nobody likes. But if we are really busy finger pointing, we're not centered in the divine, and we are not being a force for good, and we are not positively influencing the package of our life. So this is our invitation for this week. Our invitation is asking ourselves this question all through the week. How can I show up for myself? How can I show up for the people I love? How can I show up in my life? Now, some examples might be, okay, I'm going to be a really good listener. Instead of like having someone pour their heart out to you and the whole time in your head you're trying to formulate a plan to fix them, right? What if you decide just to be a good listener? Or when you find yourself being impatient with someone, okay, this week I'll just hold compassion. I will feel compassion, right? I'll just practice compassion. Okay, maybe if you don't have a gratitude practice, maybe you'd like to show up really grateful, right? Finding 10 things every day to be really grateful for. Okay, one of the things I like to do is I'll just take a nice deep breath. I close my eyes and I just will start off with, I bless myself. Today, I just bless myself and I bless others. And then I will I'll visualize somebody. And I will usually visualize somebody I love very much. And then I'll visualize someone that I don't like too much. But as I visualize them, I will say, you are loved, you are loved, you are loved. I bless you with light and love. I bless you with source energy. Okay, so blessing. But see, this is where we're starting right here in the package of our life. This is our responsibility, right? We step into our authority to show up, right? How are we going to show up? So I want you to think again about the word I asked you about, like how you felt conflict, right? What's some kind of personal conflict that you have going on in your own life? Okay, look at that and ask yourself, how can I show up bigger, brighter, and bolder for this thing that's going on right now? How can I show up bigger, brighter, and bolder? Now, we all know what it feels like to experience conflict. We know it. We will have acute awareness of being in conflict because it feels terrible. But see, here's the thing. We're all doing this every day. We either choose to stay in the conflict or we choose to be centered in the divine. Right? We have to choose that. We have to choose to remind ourselves of these 5 principles. God is all things, and that means me. And I create my experiences through my way of thinking and acting. And meditation and prayer and affirmative stuff like that aligns me more deeply with the infinite within. And it's not enough to know this. I have to live this. I have to practice this. So our choice to be centered in the divine is an action step. It is an action step. And this is the way that we see God in all things. When you are centered in the divine, you are a force for good. And all that you do resonates not just out into your own life, into your own area of influence. All that you do resonates out into the quantum field. And this means that it could be your light that breaks through a black hole of conflict that someone else is struggling with right now, even if they are not in the same room with you right now. Every time you choose to live centered in the divine, you send a blast of hope and love and faith to someone who could probably really use it. And this is how we are creating heaven on earth. So remember that you are divinely designed to be doing all of this. Everything, in everything you do, you are blessed, and so it is. So it is.